Chair, Mr. Chair.
Opportunity to contribute to this debate on behalf of the Green Party. I have to say that this legislation is quite indicative of the National Party and this government's approach to what I think we all want better outcomes for everyone in New Zealand. But the approach that is often adopted by this National Party is not supported by evidence. It's not going to solve the problem. It's actually going to make it worse. Everyone in New Zealand needs a place to live and call home. It is a fundamental human right. The way we build a prosperous and happy society is not the way that the approach they tend to take, which is maximizing profit for rentiers and vested interest groups and selling off the assets of the state. It's by looking after our people. And surely having a place to live is one of the core components of looking after our people, and particularly our children. Social housing could be improved in New Zealand. There's no question about that. There are things we could do better. There might be houses in the wrong place. There might be opportunities for Housing New Zealand to deliver to more people, but this legislation is not going to do that. And if Housing New Zealand isn't able to manage our existing stock well, why do we think that social housing providers would be able to do a better job, and why do we think the market would be able to do a better job? Certainly all the evidence from overseas shows that in the countries that do get the best outcomes in terms of education, childhood development, reducing inequality, health outcomes, and all of that flows through to a stronger economy. Of course, the purpose of the economy is to look after people, not just to have a strong economy for the sake of it. All of the countries that do that, they have a strong role of social support. And the state is in the best position to provide social support, particularly when it comes to houses for those who are the most vulnerable. The housing crisis in Auckland in particular is about both supply and demand. And I just want to refer to the Productivity Commission's paper on housing affordability from several years ago, because if you look at their analysis of the social housing situation, they suggest there are areas that need reform, but most importantly, they point out that starting reforms at state housing without addressing demand pressures and without building sufficient options for people to move on to is generating a major risk for those that are reviewed out of state housing. And I would say that it's pretty clear that the government has taken pretty much no action to address the demand problems, particularly in Auckland. They haven't done anything to address the supply issues. They like to characterize their RMA reform or deform as all about achieving affordable housing, but there's no actual evidence that what they're proposing in the RMA reforms or the SHA legislation is actually going to increase the supply where it needs to increase or reduce house prices. So all the Green Party is really asking for is that we take an evidence-based approach, that we look after our people first. There are many steps that could be taken to improve housing affordability in New Zealand. On the demand side, obviously a comprehensive capital gains tax excluding the family home and tax treatment of investment properties could be improved. The government made a tiny move in that direction. It's too little, too late. Of course, the Green Party has been calling for the same tax treatment of income from capital as from labor for quite a long time, and it's nice to see there's been a slight move in that direction. But in addition to tax treatments, it only makes sense to have restrictions on foreign capital coming in because we know that foreign capital coming in is having an impact on house prices and land values, as it is in many other jurisdictions. And there are some pretty obvious ways that we can deal with that, like limiting ownership of land to residents and citizens in New Zealand. On the supply side, it's really, the state is in the best position to address the supply issue of houses, and not just houses. but of homes and neighborhoods, because the places in Auckland where land values are highest, the places where people want to be, that's where we need to be providing dwellings for people, where they're close to jobs, where they're close to education, not out in the middle of nowhere where they're going to have an incredibly long commute, have to own multiple cars. There's no point in increasing housing affordability.
I call Joanne